Senator Dianne Feinstein of California is seeking re-election despite her very long tenure. So she's got some challenges. We're going to talk to one of them right now. One of those challengers who's on the air with us, joining us from California, is Mr. Pat Harris. Pat, good morning to you. How are you, man?
Good morning, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you. Tell us about why you made the decision to run for Senate in California.
Well, it came down to, I think the breaking point for me was the appointment of Merrick Garland when Obama put him up for appointment to the Supreme Court. I've always felt like in the last few years the Democrats have sort of rolled over, not really fought the Republicans. Then the Merrick Garland appointment came, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I felt like at that point the Democratic Party should have been up in arms, should have shut the government down. I believe it was a constitutional crisis, and I believe that the Democratic Party essentially just refused to fight. And unfortunately, I think the senator from California is one of the worst offenders. She's repeatedly stated that the correct way to govern is to work across the aisle and compromise, which is a terrific thing, and I support that wholeheartedly if you've got another party willing to work with you. And unfortunately, for 8 years, the other party hadn't been willing to. They haven't worked with us on a single thing. So I think we need fighters. I think we need people who are willing to stand up. I think we need people who are willing to fight. So that's why I made the decision.
But let's talk specifically about the current situation. Government shutdown looming. There are certain things being put before the Democrats to consider. Is this a situation where you feel Senate Democrats should hold their ground?
Absolutely. I think that this situation is reminiscent of some of the situations the Republicans in the past have been willing to block the Democrats, have been willing to shut down the government. I think we need to do the same. I believe that the DACA situation is extraordinarily important in this country. We have a majority of people, the polls show overwhelmingly, a majority of people support the DACA program. A majority actually support a path to citizenship. Mm-hmm. If we don't stand up for this when we have majorities, when we have the public behind us, then I'm not quite sure what the Democratic Party stands for.
Yeah. Well, and it would also seem to me, Pat, that it's their government. They control the branches, both houses, the White House. I mean, why would we bail them out? Wouldn't it, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there's a shutdown, who most likely would be blamed for it, us or them?
Well, I think in the current atmosphere, and obviously what's going on in the White House and the incredible unpopularity of this president, I think you're exactly right. I think the public understands what's going on in this. They understand that we're dealing with an intransigent group of people who are not willing to compromise with us, and I think absolutely, again, the polls show that they support the DACA program. I think they would support the Democrats, and I think the Democrats need to get a spine on this.
Pat Harris, folks with us, suggesting he's the one with that spine, right? Pat, tell us a bit about you that would let us know from your experience, your portfolio, your resume, to demonstrate to the voters you're the kind of person with that spine.
Well, I'm glad you asked that because that's exactly what I'm running on. For 25 years, I've been a criminal defense and civil rights attorney in California, and I've taken on some of the biggest corporations in the world. I've taken on Pfizer, I've taken on Bank of America, I've taken on Wells Fargo. I took on the Catholic Church over the sexual abuse of children. Some of you may remember a gentleman named Kenneth Starr back in the 90s, along with Susan McDougal, who I represented. We took on Kenneth Starr for 6 years. I have fought. That's what I do. Every single day of my working life, I go into a courtroom and I fight. And I fight for people who are guilty, and I fight for people who are innocent, and I fight for people who have money, and I fight for people who have no money. And I fight for people of every race, creed, color, sexual orientation. But that's what I do. That's what I've been doing for 25 years, and that's what I'll do in the U.S. Senate.
All right, folks. Pat Harris running. So how crowded is the field now? Because there's going to be a primary, right?
There is California, we're unique. We have this top two primary where.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's a little unusual.
Yeah, it is kind of strange.
No matter what party affiliation you have, it's just the the candidates who get the most votes, the top two. So oftentimes, as we had in the last Senate race, it's two Democrats. But it is getting to be a somewhat crowded field. We obviously have Senator Feinstein running. There's a gentleman who's a state senator who's running, and a couple of other people who've raised a little bit of money and seem to be semi-serious about it. So we're talking about 5 people in all.
So let me put my old campaign manager hat on, because now this is Calvin. That's right. I had forgotten that. So the top 2 would get it, and then those 2 would face each other, right?
Yes.
Is that where? So what's interesting is it's almost. I mean, so somebody listening might say, well, how are you going to beat somebody as venerable as Feinstein? But if people really want Dianne to move, I know people respect Dianne. She's done a lot of good things, but folks are ready to move on, I think, to a large extent. And if that's the case, your odds are not that bad, because if you've got a crowded field and it's the top 2, I mean, that could go in almost any direction, couldn't it?
It really can. And the interesting thing is we don't really have a Republican. The Republican Party isn't going to put anybody up, it appears.
Okay.
They've tried to get a couple of candidates interested, but the Republican Party is pretty wiped out here in California in terms of statewide. They just can't. About the most they can manage to muster is about 20 to 25%. So they can't get at a candidate who's willing to put any money in and try to raise money, because they know there's very little chance of getting beat. So you're absolutely right. Anything can happen, and right now the polls are showing that Senator Feinstein is actually not polling well at all, especially for an incumbent. She's been polling at around 40 to 41, 42%, which is, for somebody who's been in office for 23 years, those aren't great numbers. So whoever does finish second, I believe, has a real shot.
Are there going to be debates?
There will be. Some of the candidates are doing debates now. In fact, I'm doing one with 3 other candidates on Friday night. Senator Feinstein, I believe, has stated that when we get past the June primary, when there is one challenger, I believe she has stated she will do at least one debate. And I look very forward to that.
Pat Harris with us, folks. Just on some of the issues, you've made the environment a pretty big part of your campaign, haven't you?
We have. In fact, we have a very unique situation. We managed to find a 1980 school bus that had been renovated, and the inside runs totally on solar power, based on the solar panels on the roof. It runs on ethanol. Everything in it is recycled. The entire inside of the bus is recycled. And we drive it up and down the state, and not only do we talk about the environment, we live it. We show it, and we are able to actually show people the future in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. You also support Medicare for All.
Absolutely. I've always been a huge supporter of what I believe should be a single-payer health care system. In my belief, Medicare for All would be the simplest and easiest way to provide that. But this is, and we're talking about 2018, the idea that we can't provide health care. Here we are, this incredibly wealthy nation who's willing to spend billions and billions on defense, a lot of it wasted, and yet we are not willing to provide the most basic right to our citizens, I think is just a travesty.
And in these negotiations, these shutdown negotiations, the 2 biggest issues are DACA and the childhood insurance program, CHIP. They may try to use that as a carrot on a stick. As you were saying earlier, Democrats should have some backbone. And obviously, you also support a path to citizenship for the Dreamers, don't you?
I do, and I find it rather remarkable that, again, in 2018, we're having this discussion when, back in the 1980s, the Republican Party's saint, Ronald Reagan, actually promoted a path to citizenship at that time.
He did.
And it's sort of amazing to me that we now have a Republican Party and partly a Democratic Party that we're even having this discussion. Immigration has always, we've heard this a million times. We're all immigrants. We understand the concept that this is an immigrant nation and that we have been, that the whole entirety of this country is based on the fabric of different people coming from different countries and what it does and what it allows us. And yet, in 2018, we're having this discussion. I think it's revolting, personally.
You're absolutely right. Pat Harris, folks, running for Senate. You need some money?
Oh, yeah. I tell people anytime they want to write a $2 million check, I'm happy to take it. But otherwise, I'll take $10, $15, $25 and whatever we can get.
So folks, Pat, give everybody your website for those who are interested in your campaign and want to contribute.
I appreciate that. It's Pat at PatHarrisForSenate.com. As I said, we do not take corporate donations. I refuse to take donations from any corporation, and so we rely on individual donations. And most of what we get is anywhere in the range of $5 to $25, and I can tell you it's much appreciated. And I do appreciate you letting me throw that out there. And I also would tell people we will be in Burbank tomorrow night at a town hall.
Oh, great. Okay.
Doing for me. And then Friday night we're in Torrance, California at a candidate discussion.
Burbank and Torrance. And those events are on the website so people can go there and see where everything is. PatHarrisForSenate.com. But before we go on another question.
Sure.
And I just want to ask, not that I don't want us to appear to be ageist in any way, but is the senator's age an issue for voters and for the media covering this campaign? Is that something that's coming up a lot?
It does come up, Mark, but I tell you, more than anything, the thing I hear is something you said earlier. People are just ready to move on.
Okay.
I hear more than any single thing people say, I like Senator Feinstein. I respect what she's done, but it's just time for a change. Mm-hmm. We need to move on.
Yeah.
And that is more of an issue than the age.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that her release of the transcripts from the Fusion GPS witness, whose name escapes me at the moment, but do you think the release of those transcripts on her part, which was a pretty bold move, was that a political running for re-election move, you think?
Sure. Absolutely. She's, in the last month, she has started veering toward the left, and it's obvious because there is a large contingency of voters out here who feel that she is way too conservative, and I applaud her for doing it. I'm glad to see that she stood up and had the courage to do it, but we need people who have the courage not just in an election year. They need to have the courage in the other 5 years they're in office. So.
And lastly, your other senator is Kamala Harris.
Yes.
What are people talking about there? Is there any buzz or any conversation? Do you get asked questions about what if she runs for president?
It's brought up a lot. I think she has a great deal of support here. Mm-hmm. She seems to be able to sort of bridge both progressives and the more moderate wing of the party, at least for now. So I think she's managed to do a very good job of that, and I think she signed on to Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, and that was a very bold move, and I think it's endeared her a lot to the progressives here. So that's it's interesting, Mark. She is somebody who is brought up a lot. And I think right now she's very popular here.
Did you supported Bernie in 2016?
I did.
Okay.
I did. It's interesting. I'm from Arkansas originally. I grew up with the Clintons. In a state when the Clintons were running, and I knew Bill, I knew Hillary. But I've always been a little suspect of their politics, and I tend to be more progressive, and I did support Bernie.
Is Bernie? Are you seeking Bernie's endorsement in California, or would that even help you? What?
I suspect from talking to people around him that he will wait till we have the primary, and that there'll be the two finalists. And I think at that point he very well might endorse whoever comes out against Senator Feinstein. I don't think he's a huge fan. She was pretty tough on him when he was running against Hillary. She actually suggested very early on that he withdraw from the race, and she made some pretty tough remarks. So I suspect he's not a fan.
And this will be my final question, I promise.
Sure.
How does a Senate candidate in California respond to the existential concerns for Californians, mudslides, fires. That has to come up.
It does, and again, we talk a lot about the environment in this campaign. We talk a lot about what's obviously going on with climate change and some of the solutions that we have to have, including things like regenerative agriculture, including shifting away jobs back into more energy efficient and away from the non-renewable resources. So I think that's something that hits very well with Californians because we're seeing the effects of climate change, very much so.
Sure. Pat Harris for Senate.com. Pat, pleasure to meet you. Good luck with the campaign, buddy. Let's talk again, okay?
I would love to, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. It's a pleasure to have you. Take care now and enjoy your day. Okay, we didn't get to everybody. Mark, Adam, and Dave. Give me a call tomorrow if all minds are clear. It has been made plain.